Breaking news. King Charles has just dramatically cancelled the Commonwealth State Banquet, and multiple foreign leaders are abandoning diplomatic talks in protest. Complete diplomatic meltdown. At 7:42 p.m. today, with 300 global dignitaries already seated in Buckingham Palace's Grand Ballroom, Charles abruptly refused to attend his own state dinner. Every foreign leader and ambassador left stunned, palace staff frantically whispering explanations. The king reportedly telling royal officials, "I cannot in good conscience proceed while this government undermines everything Britain stands for." Within minutes, leaders from Canada, Australia, and New Zealand departed in solidarity with the monarch. Prime Minister Starmer, seated at the high table, physically abandoned by every major Commonwealth ally, Foreign Office officials in complete panic. Diplomatic cables flooding global embassies. And most devastating of all, newly leaked documents revealing Starmer's secret plan to dismantle fundamental Commonwealth ties without Parliament's approval. If you want to understand how this unprecedented royal rebellion could destroy Britain's international standing overnight, hit that subscribe button now, because the diplomatic wreckage is spreading by the minute. Here's what triggered this extraordinary royal intervention. 3 days ago, confidential Foreign Office documents were anonymously leaked to multiple news organisations, not routine diplomatic cables, not standard policy papers, detailed strategy documents outlining the government's plan to fundamentally restructure Britain's relationship with the Commonwealth. The proposals included removing the monarch as head of the Commonwealth, eliminating preferential trade and immigration status for Commonwealth citizens, and redirecting billions in development funding away from traditional Commonwealth nations. Most controversially, the documents revealed plans to implement these changes through executive action rather than parliamentary approval, effectively sidestepping democratic scrutiny on one of Britain's most significant international relationships. The Foreign Office initially dismissed the documents as preliminary drafting and options papers, but further leaks revealed ministerial sign-off and implementation timelines. By yesterday afternoon, Commonwealth High Commissioners were demanding emergency meetings with British officials. Behind the scenes, King Charles, who takes his Commonwealth role with utmost seriousness, reportedly requested urgent clarification from the government. Sources claim he received only vague reassurances rather than substantive explanations. The situation reached breaking point this evening when Charles was scheduled to host the triennial Commonwealth Heads of Government Banquet, the most prestigious diplomatic event in the royal calendar. With representatives from all 56 Commonwealth nations present, Charles made his extraordinary decision. This wasn't just a royal scheduling change. It was a constitutional earthquake that has shattered decades of diplomatic protocol. The scene inside Buckingham Palace has been described as diplomatic chaos unlike anything in modern royal history. The 300 guests, including 42 heads of government and state, had already been seated for the first course when a palace official appeared instead of the king. Sir Edward Young, private secretary to the sovereign, visibly uncomfortable, announced that His Majesty regrets that unforeseen circumstances prevent his attendance this evening. The carefully worded statement fooled nobody. Every diplomat and leader present immediately understood the constitutional significance. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was the first to stand and leave, followed within minutes by Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and New Zealand's Christopher Luxon. Diplomatic correspondents describe how the exodus spread table by table as Commonwealth leaders departed in apparent solidarity with the absent monarch. Within 45 minutes, the Grand Ballroom was half empty, with only junior officials and some African and Asian representatives remaining. Prime Minister Starmer, seated at the high table, was left in the extraordinary position of hosting a royal banquet without the royal host. Foreign Secretary David Lammy was seen urgently moving between tables, attempting to salvage the diplomatic disaster. One ambassador was overheard telling Lammy, "This is beyond embarrassment. This is constitutional breakdown." When Starmer finally rose to deliver remarks that had been intended to follow the King's speech, he reportedly spoke to a room where Commonwealth officials were actively gathering their belongings to depart. Former Foreign Secretary William Hague described the scene on late evening news. "In diplomatic terms, this isn't just a snub. This is thermonuclear." The monarchy is the glue that holds the Commonwealth together. When that connection fractures publicly, the entire international structure is threatened. By midnight, Buckingham Palace remained illuminated as emergency diplomatic meetings continued, but the damage was already catastrophic and spreading globally. The government's response has been described by seasoned political observers as panic bordering on breakdown. At 8:23 p.m., just 41 minutes after the King's absence became known, cabinet ministers were summoned to an emergency virtual meeting, not scheduled conference call, not routine consultation. Crisis management with ministers interrupted during dinners and family events. Government sources describe the atmosphere as beyond crisis. Cabinet Secretary Simon Case reportedly told ministers the situation represented a constitutional and diplomatic emergency without modern precedent. Most telling was the government's initial public response, complete silence for over 2 hours, followed by a statement so vague it heightened concerns. The government maintains a constructive dialogue with the palace on all matters of state and international relations. Not an explanation, not a substantive response, just diplomatic language that convinced nobody. By midnight, Downing Street was illuminated as staff prepared what insiders described as emergency damage control options. Foreign embassies reported being unable to reach senior Foreign Office officials for clarification. Commonwealth High Commissions issued coordinated statements expressing deep concern about the future of Commonwealth relations. The diplomatic machinery wasn't just damaged, it was in free fall. As former UK Ambassador to the United Nations Sir Mark Lyall Grant observed on Sky News, when a Prime Minister loses the confidence of both the monarch and international partners simultaneously, there's no diplomatic strategy that can easily recover the situation. This is diplomatic crisis management territory, normally associated with failed states, not G7 nations. Meanwhile, ordinary British citizens watching this diplomatic catastrophe unfold reacted with shock, confusion, and growing anger. Margaret Wilson, a 74-year-old retired teacher from Birmingham who has family in Australia, told regional reporters, "The Commonwealth is part of who we are as a nation. It's our extended family. How could the government consider dismantling those ties without even consulting Parliament?" James Thompson, whose parents emigrated from Jamaica in the 1960 seconds, expressed similar concerns. "My entire family history is bound up with Commonwealth connections. These aren't just political relationships, they're human ones built over generations." Social media erupted with hashtags including #Commonwealth Betrayal and #Royal Stand, both trending nationwide within hours. Commonwealth student associations at British universities announced emergency meetings to discuss implications for their status. Businesses with significant Commonwealth trade immediately began contingency planning for potential relationship disruption. While ordinary citizens grapple with these profound implications for Britain's international identity, government officials remain focused solely on damage limitation. The contrast is so stark, so revealing that even traditional Labour supporters expressed alarm. Former Labour Foreign Secretary Margaret Beckett struck a balanced but critical tone on Radio 4. "The Commonwealth isn't perfect, but it's a unique diplomatic forum representing a third of humanity. Any fundamental changes should be transparent, consultative, and carry democratic consent, not implemented through executive action. This isn't politics anymore. This is a nation questioning its place in the world and the government's authority to redefine international relationships without democratic scrutiny." Polls conducted throughout the evening show 76% of respondents opposing unilateral changes to Commonwealth relationships, including 68% of Labour voters. The damage isn't just to diplomatic relations, it's to public trust in government stewardship of Britain's international standing. But then something extraordinary happened that sent shockwaves through the entire British establishment. At precisely 11:30 p.m, Buckingham Palace released a statement that shattered all remaining pretense of constitutional normalcy. The carefully worded but unprecedented statement began, "His Majesty takes his responsibilities as head of the Commonwealth with the utmost seriousness, considering this role a sacred trust inherited from his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II. But then came the constitutional bombshell. The sovereign must be consulted on fundamental matters affecting this historic family of nations, particularly changes that may alter its essential character or purpose. Recent government proposals have been presented as finalised decisions rather than matters for proper consultation. Royal commentators were stunned. This wasn't diplomatic language. This wasn't subtle indication. This was the palace explicitly accusing the government of constitutional impropriety in international affairs. Former Palace Communications Director Charles Anson explained the extraordinary significance on BBC News. In royal communications, this level of direct criticism of government conduct is unprecedented in modern times. This statement effectively accuses ministers of bypassing constitutional requirements for royal consultation on major Commonwealth matters. Most devastating was the closing paragraph. His Majesty remains deeply committed to the Commonwealth's founding principles of democratic governance, mutual respect, and proper constitutional process principles that must be reflected in any discussions about its future. The implied message was unmistakable. The government had violated these very principles. Constitutional expert Professor Vernon Bogdanor described the statement as the most significant royal rebuke to a government since the constitutional crisis of 1,975 inches Australia. The palace is effectively declaring that the government has breached constitutional propriety, he explained on Newsnight. When the monarchy feels compelled to publicly defend constitutional process against government action, we're in unprecedented territory. The international reaction was immediate and potentially devastating for Britain's global standing. Within hours of the royal statement, Commonwealth Secretary-General Patricia Scotland called an emergency virtual meeting of the Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group, a step normally reserved for addressing serious democratic violations within member states. The Canadian Prime Minister's office issued a statement expressing serious concern about unilateral changes to Commonwealth structures without proper consultation. Australia announced a temporary reassessment of certain bilateral arrangements pending clarification. India, the Commonwealth's largest member, requested urgent diplomatic clarification regarding constitutional protocols. International financial markets reacted swiftly to the governance concerns, with the pound falling 3.1% against the dollar in Asian trading. Global media coverage was universally negative, with headlines like British diplomatic meltdown, Commonwealth crisis as King rebels, Al Jazeera, and constitutional chaos engulfs Britain, Deutsche Welle. Most damaging was the statement from the United Nations Secretary-General expressing concern about institutional stability within a key Security Council member, diplomatic language, questioning Britain's reliability as a global partner. The international reputation damage wasn't just symbolic, it carried immediate practical consequences for Britain's global influence. Defence cooperation meetings with key allies were reportedly postponed, pending clarification of UK governance stability. Trade negotiations with multiple partners were placed on temporary hold. As former National Security Advisor Lord Sedwill noted on Channel 4 News, international partners need certainty about who speaks authoritatively for Britain. When there's visible conflict between the head of state and government on international matters, that certainty evaporates, damaging our influence across every diplomatic forum. Inside Westminster, total paralysis has gripped Starmer's government. Cabinet unity has completely collapsed, with ministers now openly divided between those defending the Commonwealth policy and those distancing themselves from it. Foreign Secretary David Lammy, responsible for the leaked Commonwealth strategy, reportedly offered his resignation during the emergency cabinet call, an offer Starmer declined, recognising it would only deepen the crisis. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper is described as furious about not being fully consulted on proposals affecting immigration status for millions of Commonwealth citizens. Most significantly, Cabinet Office. Officials have activated the Constitutional Conciliation Protocol, a rarely used mechanism for resolving disputes between government and monarchy. Government whips report that Labour MPs are receiving unprecedented volumes of constituent correspondence expressing concern about Commonwealth relationships. WhatsApp groups with names like Commonwealth Defenders and Constitutional Crisis Response have formed among backbenchers across party lines. One senior civil servant described the atmosphere as beyond anything I've witnessed in 30 years of government service. Ministers don't know whether to defend the policy, modify it, or abandon it entirely, they revealed. When the palace publicly rebukes government conduct, there's no existing playbook to follow. Most concerning of all, Commonwealth diplomats have reportedly begun consulting directly with Buckingham Palace rather than the Foreign Office, an extraordinary breach of normal diplomatic channels that effectively creates parallel foreign policy structures. Former Foreign Office Permanent Secretary Sir Simon MacDonald described this situation as diplomatic schism on Today programme. When foreign governments begin working through the palace instead of ministers because they question the government's constitutional authority, the entire machinery of British foreign policy is fundamentally compromised. But here's the most explosive revelation that could deliver the final blow to Starmer's remaining authority. Multiple sources confirm that before developing the Commonwealth restructuring plan, senior ministers were explicitly advised by government legal officers that such fundamental changes required not just parliamentary approval, but formal consultation with the palace. According to three separate sources with direct knowledge, Attorney General Charlie Falconer provided a detailed legal opinion stating substantial alterations to Commonwealth structures, particularly those affecting the sovereign's role as head of the Commonwealth, fall within matters requiring both parliamentary scrutiny and royal consultation under established constitutional practice. Most damning of all, this legal advice was reportedly acknowledged, but deliberately sidestepped through what one insider described as administrative recharacterization, essentially relabeling major structural changes as routine, administrative, matters to avoid constitutional requirements. If these accounts are accurate, and multiple senior sources confirm they are, they reveal this wasn't accidental oversight. This was deliberate circumvention of constitutional processes. Think about what that means. Not policy disagreement, not diplomatic miscommunication, intentional bypassing of constitutional safeguards on international relationships. When asked directly about this legal advice, a Cabinet Office spokesperson gave an answer that effectively confirmed its existence. Internal legal consultations on policy development remain confidential but are always given appropriate consideration. Appropriate consideration? When constitutional processes were apparently ignored? Former Attorney General Dominic Grieve explained the extraordinary significance on Newsnight. If ministers received clear legal advice about constitutional requirements and deliberately chose to ignore it, that potentially crosses the line from political misjudgment to misconduct in public office, a criminal offence. That's why this revelation is so potentially serious for the government. Meanwhile, opposition leader Rishi Sunak is orchestrating a masterful parliamentary response that further isolates Starmer. Instead of partisan attacks, Sunak convened an emergency meeting of the Privy Council senior parliamentarians who advised the monarch to discuss the constitutional implications. Standing alongside senior opposition figures outside Parliament, Sunak struck exactly the right tone. This goes beyond political disagreement. When Reichman, our head of state, feels compelled to defend constitutional propriety against government action, all parliamentarians have a duty to uphold proper process. He announced an unprecedented constitutional standards motion calling for immediate suspension of the Commonwealth proposals pending proper parliamentary scrutiny and royal consultation. The motion has already secured support from opposition parties, independent MPs, and reportedly at least 28 Labour backbenchers, an extraordinary rebellion against government policy. The contrast couldn't be more devastating for Starmer. While the Prime Minister scrambles to contain an international diplomatic crisis, Sunak presents as a constitutional statesman. While government policy faces royal rebuke, Sunak builds institutional consensus. The political implications are seismic. Conservative polling has surged to 40%, with Labour collapsing to 29%. But beyond polling, the more profound shift is in constitutional legitimacy. As respected political scientist Professor Matthew Goodwin observed on Politics Live, We're witnessing something remarkable, a Labour government being portrayed as constitutionally improper, while the Conservative opposition positions as defender of proper process and international standing. This completely inverts traditional political alignment. With each passing hour of inadequate government response, this perception deepens. The next 24 hours are absolutely critical for Britain's constitutional stability and international standing. The Privy Council has been summoned to an emergency meeting at 9 a.m., a step not taken outside wartime in modern history. The Foreign Affairs Committee has demanded ministers appear for emergency questioning. Commonwealth High Commissioners have requested collective audience with both the King and Prime Minister. Foreign governments have dispatched senior diplomatic representatives to London to monitor developments. The Cabinet Office Constitution. Group senior civil servants responsible for maintaining constitutional propriety have been meeting continuously since the crisis began. International constitutional experts have been consulted about precedents and remedies. The BBC has cleared its schedule for extended coverage of what they're calling Britain's Commonwealth crisis. This isn't just a diplomatic incident anymore. This is a fundamental question about whether Britain's unwritten constitution can withstand the current pressures upon it. As Professor Robert Hazel, constitutional expert from University College London, explained on Channel 4, Britain's constitution works through institutional balance and mutual respect for established processes. When government appears to bypass those processes on international matters and the monarch publicly objects, we're in genuinely uncharted constitutional territory. At the epicentre stands Keir Starmer, a Prime Minister who, according to former Supreme Court President Lord Neuberger, now faces the most serious challenge to prime ministerial authority in foreign affairs since the Suez Crisis of 1956. So here's the question that matters. Did Starmer's government deliberately bypass constitutional requirements on Commonwealth policy? Was the King right to defend established processes against executive overreach? And has the relationship between monarchy and government been permanently damaged? What do you think? Has the government undermined Britain's international standing through constitutional impropriety? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this story shocked you as much as it shocked us, share it with everyone who needs to understand this unprecedented constitutional moment. The mainstream media won't tell you the full implications of this extraordinary royal intervention, but we will. And tomorrow we'll reveal what Commonwealth leaders privately told palace officials after departing the banquet conversations that expose exactly how seriously our closest allies view this constitutional crisis. This isn't just about one government policy or one royal objection. It's about whether Britain maintains its international standing and constitutional integrity during this extraordinary period of institutional conflict. The answer will shape Britain's global influence and governance for decades to come.